G'day, my name's Ian Dooley and welcome again to Let's Get Fiscal, the official podcast of the Australian Employment Party. I'm here again this week with my good friend Tim Jones. Hi Tim, how you going?
Hello Ian, hello again.
And just as always, a bit of housekeeping. You can find out all about the Australian Employment Party at australianemploymentparty.org. You can search Australian Employment Party on Facebook. You can go to our forum, which is linked from the website. You can subscribe to this YouTube channel, find out all about it, and if you like what you see, then you can click the Join Now button on the website and sign up. We're trying to get to 500 members. We're inching up to our first 100 this week, so if you like what you see, get involved. If you have some extra questions, just DM Tim on Twitter. He is at 4thleft2. You can also tweet at me. I'm at Ian Dooley. Or you can also private message me on Facebook. If you just join up to the group, you can grab me there. So Tim, pretty big week.
It has been a big week. It's been a very strange week. It's let me see now. I think we were talking about the Royal Commission, the Child Protection Royal Commission finishing up. There's a census fail. There are a number of issues that have been coming up. It's been really chaotic, and it's not good for the government. It's not looking terribly competent at the moment.
No, it's I kind of haven't heard anything much coming out of the government except for apologies and negativity.
And blaming, lots of blame. Yeah.
So yeah, we had the this explosive Nauru files that came out, and of course everyone calling for a royal commission, yet another royal commission, right? And then we've got the Royal Commission going ahead into Don Dale and Northern Territory detention of Indigenous youth.
Yeah.
We've got right. On Monday. So what's interesting about this is that we have all these. Everyone's always calling for a Royal Commission into the banks. On Monday, I saw an article quietly come out that said that there was a Royal Commission result. There's a Child Protection Royal Commission in South Australia, but very little fanfare about that.
No.
So it seems there's a lot of fanfare going into a Royal Commission, but do they really deliver anything? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. They just seem like a poultice you put on the wound. It sounds a little bit like 18th century medicine sometimes because, for instance, the Turk was headed by Dyson Hayden, which was a particularly partisan judge who was appointed to the job of persecuting the trade unions. And though most Australians don't think trade unions are a problem, not at all. And then there's Don Dale and Brian Martin. He disqualified himself because the amount of flack coming about some controversial decisions that he had made in the past. So they are really fraught, and they do seem ineffectual, and I would say not very efficacious. It seems like they're the weapon of last resort, but they don't work very well.
Yeah, so that the Aboriginal deaths into custody, in the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody, came out with all these, something 300 something recommendations.
Yes.
None of which were adopted.
No.
And Aboriginal people still suffering massive injustices, not only with Don Dale, that's kind of resurfaced, but also multiple deaths across the country which are not being investigated.
No.
And not receiving the amount of attention that they would if they weren't Indigenous. And so it just seems as though we've got the ongoing Royal Commission into child sex abuse, and George Pell was able to sort of dodge his responsibility around that by just staying in Italy. It just seems as though there's a bit of a toothless tiger.
Well, a philosopher, a professor of mine in philosophy, he said one day to me, he said, "Look, Tim, just because a structure's in place doesn't mean that it's working."
Yeah, that's pretty good.
People really do believe that structure's enough. It's not. It's not. The spirit of that structure. There has to be, the ghost in the machine. The Deus Machina.
I sense a word I don't know coming here. Is there a word for this that you're grasping for? This some sort of Tim Jones vocabulary.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, but I do carry on. But they become meaningless. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, well,
and repetitious too. So let's do a square dance. Okay, we've got a problem. Let's do a square dance. Fantastic. Oh, how do you feel now? Still got a problem.
So the going into this election, we had this huge call for royal commission into banks.
Yeah.
And you know, what I never heard was like, what would the terms of reference be? What would that specifically be addressing, and all this kind of stuff. What I don't understand really about this is why, when there's evidence of criminal behaviour, for example, in the Don Dale situation where there was clearly assault going on and it was filmed, and there was all sorts of breaches of duty of care, with Aboriginal deaths in custody where there's clear breaches of duty of care, why is it that we need a royal commission rather than just arresting people? When banks are engaged in fraudulent behaviour, when they're doing destructive things, why can't we set up a system? Why do we need a royal commission in order to make changes to that system instead of like arresting people and then putting in place better regulation?
You'd think so, but it does seem, I think, to many a thinking Australian, and I like to use the term thinking Australian, is that these things are set up as some sort of a pacifier. Royal Commission as pacifier. Here's your dummy, you know, and if you care enough to think about it, here you go. There's no nutrition in it, there's no justice, there's no real change, there's no reform, but we've done something for you, you know?
Yeah. And I think, you know, it hits home, I think, for me, you know, in terms of what I know about it, my kind of like special interest in this, which is economics, thinking about the RC into banks, it's already obvious and already stated academically by so many MMT economists, not even just MMT economists, all post-Keynesians, you know, Minsky, Abel-Lerner, have all come up with specific regulatory frameworks for banking and finance. My favourite way of wording it is Warren Mosler, where he says that instead of regulating what banks aren't allowed to do, so you aren't allowed to do this, you aren't allowed to do that, he wants us to regulate what banks are allowed to do.
Yeah, sort of like whitelisting.
Yeah, right.
A definition and boundaries. We're talking about boundaries, aren't we? Just like with children or dogs or friends or something like that.
Yeah, you talk about boundaries. Really, that's the essence of social democracy. It's not in a sense a form. It's like people could think of it as socialism, but really, it's not socialism, because socialism excludes all private ownership. Social democracy is about providing a framework within which capitalism can operate effectively towards the public purpose. And
that's right.
You know, that's what people expect from governments. And I think that, you know, as soon as governments stop doing that, that's really why we accept this sovereign imposition of taxation. You know, which is what drives demand for the currency and means that the government can spend to provision itself. We accept that because we expect in return that the government will provide us with services and frameworks and an ethical framework. And as soon as the government stops doing that, it goes into this negative feedback loop where we see the government caught up in finance, and we kind of distrust, and so we start voting for smaller government and spending cuts, which actually makes things worse for us.
Well, trust is a major issue, and we'll talk about census fail later. But in terms of what the government's supposed to be doing for us, and that's the essence of what these podcasts are about, is that we want to reform the nature of government, the way that people see the government, how the government is about the common good, the common weal, and it's all about them looking after us because we pay them to look after us.
That's it. Yeah.
It's not that complicated.
We allow the government to sequester a certain amount of resources to provision itself, and that's what money is, right? And the reason we allow that is because they're going to facilitate our operation as a society. So with the banking and finance thing and the RC into the banks and royal commissions generally, I just think that you know, we need to a bit more of a hands-on approach to regulation, and you know, in particular with banking and finance, we need to start with the question: what is the public purpose of a finance system? And then make it look like that, because that's what we can do. It's not.
Well, it's sort of an abstract idea, isn't it? And that's what we're trying to push, is get these abstract ideas out about, and because people think that what is now is all that's going to happen. We're going to talk about the New Zealand later on, and that's going to be pertinent.
And you're saying this quote from your philosophy professor who said, just because the structure's in place doesn't mean it's working. I think people, and it, in fact, ties in really well with one of my favourite Steve Jobs quotes. And if you look up on YouTube Steve Jobs' opinion of life or something, he says, look around you. Everything around you was just made up by people who are no smarter than you are, and you can make up your own things. And the example you're talking about with New Zealand, they completely reformed their entire voting system.
Yes.
Not just voting, but parliament.
It's the MPP system. It was a proportional representation. They brought it in under Labor tried to do it, and then the Nationals brought it in, which is surprising after a referendum. It was trialled. They had quite some success. The people were much better represented. The smaller parties got an equal proportion, unlike what was happening at the moment, where Pauline Hanson gets 4 senators, and the Greens, they've actually lost, but they got almost twice the percentage. So things can change, and it is pretty amazing, and people do think that we're just stuck in the rut. But like you say, the people in government aren't that much smarter than us.
Right. Well, yeah. In a lot of cases, I'd say a little bit.
Yeah, I was being kind. Yeah.
But it's an interesting thing that you sort of like. I come across when I start to talk about these things with people sometimes. Now that I've taken a real interest in politics and started this political party, one of the chief complaints that I hear from, or one of the chief criticisms I hear from people about this stuff is, oh, you can't change that because it's so entrenched, or that's the way things are. And I really think that type of attitude, not only is it not true, because we do have really good examples of things that have changed, but it's kind of defeatist. And it's if you allow that attitude to perpetuate, it's really self-fulfilling.
Well, that's right. They've had referendums here before. Probably the most successful was one to include the Indigenous people as citizens within our country, and that was amazing. It was a really positive thing. But ever since then, a lot of the questions, like John Howard with the referendum about the Republic and so on, he manipulated it so it fell apart, because you couldn't vote either way. There was no lesser evil. It was just, and it was abandoned. And a lot of these things, they do fall apart because people manipulate it. And that's what I was mentioning to you before, is the trouble with politics is that you have all these spinmeisters who are desperate to put a stick in the spokes of anything that's moving. And what I was suggesting to you before is that really I would really like children to be taught ethics and rhetoric at school, so that they know when they're being manipulated, when somebody's trying to influence them, when somebody's actually outright lying or twisting the facts, or even substituting their own facts for facts. And somehow we could educate Australia. And people think education is so that you can learn quantum physics. No, it's about so you can cope.
Yeah, I think that the view of education purely as a vocational pursuit is something we need to get away from, because in order for a really well-functioning democracy, I think we need an educated population beyond their specific work skills.
Absolutely. I was a tradesman, and I went back and did a degree, an arts degree in psych and linguistics, purely because I felt like I needed to supplement my education. I haven't earned any money from that degree, but I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah, and I feel exactly the same way. I did an engineering degree and doubled with arts. And I did. I learned Japanese, and I studied urban geography. And urban geography was really interesting. And I learned things doing that course that are still with me today. And you learn to respect expertise, which is what this government doesn't do. With the dismantling of the CSIRO and the questioning of climate change, sacking all of our climate scientists. These people are arrogating themselves a place in history that they would not probably want. You can sort of see this happening. There's like a sucking away. Because by saying, we've got to cut spending all the time, hammering people with got to cut spending, it's putting people into a mindset of scarcity, where we sort of think, we don't have time to learn all these fluffy things. We don't have time to learn all that. We've just got to make money. We've just got to work hard. We've just got to save our money and put it into our house and pull our head in and don't rock the boat. And that's, in a way, I guess makes it easier to then manipulate the voting public into doing what you want them to do at polling time.
It's bleakness.
Right. It really is. It's a very
it,
it's a very sort of monoculture creation.
It's certainly not much fun. I mean, I remember eras that were more fun than this one, I can tell you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, anyway, now, were we going to? We've done enough on that. Are we going to talk about the census, or?
Yeah. Well, the census. What a disaster.
Yes.
The one thing, I mean, I don't really. What I saw was a lot of competing information, contradicting information, misinformation. There was things about sort of scary stuff about that you're going to get fined this much, but the conditions under which they fine people are actually kind of different. You don't just sort of default get fined.
No, they have to make a demand on you, and then you have to formally refuse.
You have to do all this stuff, So everyone out there, if you haven't completed the census, you're not going to get a bill in the mail. And I'd say that's about half the households in Australia at this point. So you're not alone.
Like I mentioned trust before. Trust is so important, and unfortunately we've got some. I'm trying to avoid saying what I say on Twitter about this government on this podcast, but they are so wrong-headed. They are so blind to the obvious and so set on their own dogmatic agenda that somehow they've managed to completely undermine the credibility and the trust that the census has built up over the last 100 years.
Yeah, and also an interesting article I saw was that the mistrust engendered by this complete failure to conduct an electronic census will set the cause back for electronic voting significantly. And that e-government generally will have a really tainted image as a result of this. And I thought that was a good opportunity for us to discuss, because one of the main things we want to do with this podcast is use the topical like topics of the week to give people a feel for our approach and what we think about how government should conduct itself.
That's right.
When it comes to government spending, our approach really is that the government should should nationalise any natural monopoly. So anything like roads and NBN infrastructure spending should all be nationalised because it can't benefit from competition.
A bit like Telstra and the Commonwealth Bank.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So that like even a payment system, it would make sense to have a nationalised payment system. So quite different from the neoliberal agenda on that front. But then also, I think that in addition to just that sort of infrastructure spending, the government has a tremendous role to play in innovation spending, research and development spending, and in particular, I think that we should be investing in food production technology, energy technology, because both of those things protect our economy from external shocks. And then thirdly, this may be a slight bias because I'm a software guy, but that we could be investing in a lot of open source technology, not just software, but also patents and that kind of thing, which provide a basis for commercialization by the private sector, because the private sector.
Well, the CSIRO achieved that itself with Wi-Fi. They invented Wi-Fi for goodness sake.
And there's a book called The Entrepreneurial State by an author by the name of Matsukato. I think it's Maria Matsukato, and she talks about how even the successes that we're seeing now in Silicon Valley really trace their genesis back to government investment in research and development. And we have a government that's terrified of doing anything. And won't spend any money. Having a government that's afraid to spend any money means that that's the real debt that we're leaving to our grandkids, isn't it? Because they're not investing in anything.
Well, that's right. I mean, we've always been proud of our achievements, of our scientists and innovators, and they often go overseas, as so many talented people have, because this country has been... I think the word plutocracy came up there recently. Stephanie Dowrick, I think she talked about a bit plutocracy because Gina Reinhardt, she paid for Barnaby Joyce's poll workers, and then now, it's a funny thing where it's not about the 24 million people here. It's just about this club of people who are running the show.
Yeah, well, it sort of comes from the government being pussyfooting around, being so afraid to spend anything, afraid to invest in research and development, afraid to be seen to be providing real infrastructure services. Harking back to this whole economic rationalism, neoliberalism thing from the 80s. And as a result, we end up groveling to big business people for jobs and groveling to them for money to run our country. Oh, please give us some money. All the while forgetting the fact that we could, as a people, we are the ones that control our spending. We elect representatives who issue currency on a floating exchange rate. So we have a lot of scope for how we can choose to set up our society. We're kind of artificially constraining it by not allowing ourselves to spend on things. And, e-government would be a tremendous investment for the government to make, to have a project to do open source programming for creating the platforms that are going to run the country in the future.
Well, the current government, you definitely couldn't describe them as visionaries, could you?
No, it's just complete blinkered view.
It's complete capitulation to some sort of rum core ideal that everything's okay. Neo-feudalism has been raised up, and we don't want to carry on too much about this sort of thing. But and how are we going to finish anyway? Are we? You have a point we wanted to finish on?
I think that what we've talked about a lot today is trust and the public purpose,
Yes.
and there's a lecture series. One of the first lecture series I ever watched on modern monetary theory was called Modern Money and the Public Purpose. And once you realize the nature of money, once you realize the state theory of money and how money gets its value and how it comes to be, you start to see that the only point of money really is to provide a public purpose. And if it seems as though we've kind of lost that. We've lost that thinking, and we've got in our minds this thing: government spending, that's the wrong kind of spending. But it's the complete opposite, and we've lost our trust in ourselves, and we've lost our trust in our governments.
Well, I'll tell you something. Today I was called an idiot or a fool by one of my old Facebook friends. I've unfriended him because I didn't support Donald Trump.
Right.
Today, and he's saying, government this, government that, and I think, well, hang on, there are better ways to make a country better than to destroy it.
Yeah, that's right. So the last thing I wanted to end on as well is also a bit of exciting news. I caught up with Steve Keen, who's a very prominent economic professor this week. We chatted on Skype, and he's interested in working with the party. He's very time poor, but we are going to be putting his Debt Jubilee manifesto into our policy discussion forum and using it as the basis for policy around housing affordability and how we can deleverage ourselves from this private debt monster that we've created.
Debt jubilee is a funny phrase, though, isn't it? Can you talk to that?
Well, it basically just means forgiving a bunch of debts, working out a way to ease the transition from being very highly leveraged, very indebted society, which is burdening everyone. So, for example, I know a couple of friends of mine where one spouse works to pay for the mortgage, the other spouse works to support the family.
That's right.
If you eased up on that burden, all of a sudden they'd have all this disposable income to spend in non-finance sectors of the society. So, and also then we would pave the way for better financial growth. So, debt jubilee just is basically like, how people talk about the government in bailing out the banks. It's kind of like bailing out the public, which is a much more productive way and stimulates the economy much better if you are able to sort of nationalize mortgages and remove a lot of those debts, cancel a lot of the debt. But obviously, we need to do it sensibly. You can't just come in here.
But with the response to the GFC, there was a big criticism of Obama for the Freddie Mae. Banks were too big to fail, so he just bailed them out. And then, of course, lucky over there, they've got jingle money. If you want to default on your mortgage, you just send the keys to the house back to the bank, and then you don't owe them it anymore. But Australia's different.
Right. Okay.
It's jingle money, so you get all these envelopes full of house keys, and then the person walks away, and that's what happened to Detroit. And so,
well, the interesting thing is that if the government had bailed out the public instead of the banks,
yes,
by supplying them with the ability to pay their mortgages, it would have bailed out both of them, because the mortgage assets the assets that were backed by those mortgages would have not been toxic. And so the banking sector would not have failed. But at the same time, everyone would have got to keep their houses.
Well, it seems particularly ideologically driven. It's a big boys club, the smoking room. I don't know. It's something we'll keep talking about.
Yeah. So anyway,
it can change.
This is an ongoing discussion. It's just I just wanted to let people know that if they're interested, if they've heard of Steve Keen's work, if they're interested in the idea of a debt jubilee, a modern debt jubilee, we're going to be putting that into our policy discussion forums. It's aep.freeforums.net. Jump in there and check it out, and you're going to be hearing more about that from us and hopefully from Steve.
Good. It's all very interesting stuff. I hope people are interested when they listen to us. It's good stuff, and nobody else is talking about it, I don't think.
Yeah, well, apart from Steve.
Like nobody in this country. Yeah. Okay. Well, look, this has been great, and enjoy your week.
Yeah, you too. Thanks, Tim.
Okay then. Bye-bye.
Bye.